Final Fantasy X is one of the greatest titles of the Final Fantasy series ever made. It was first released on the PlayStation 2 in 2001, and it is the very first game in the series to be released on such a console. The game was later remastered for PS3, PS4, PS Vita, PC, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox One. This game has sold over 21.1 million units worldwide by the end of March 2022. Set in the fantasy world of Spira, a setting influenced by the South Pacific, Thailand, and Japan, the game's story revolves around a group of adventurers and their quest to defeat a rampaging monster called Sin. The game was an absolute success upon release, featuring advanced graphics, voice acting, and was also loved for its amazing story centering on the themes of truth, corruption, love, loss, grief, and the conflict between free will and fate. It also focuses on religion and the rejection of tradition, as well as the contrast between nature and technology. The official timeline of Final Fantasy X has been published in the Final Fantasy Ultimania Omega and the Final Fantasy X-2 International plus Last Mission Ultimania, published by DigiCube and Square Enix. And now, let us begin the timeline of Final Fantasy X.
Listen to my story. This may be our last chance.
Pre-Final Fantasy X, 3,000 years ago. According to Shinra, an Albert technological whiz kid, fiends were the first life form in Spira before humans and other animals came to be. 3,000 years ago, the people of Spira developed a magic civilization. A race of people called the Dolls, later known as the Albed, invent machines called Machina to make people's lives who couldn't use magic a lot easier. The use of Machina will later spread throughout Spira until it surpassed magic. A millennia before Final Fantasy X. Over 1,000 years before the events of the game, the Bedolls became a lower caste of society. Bevel marked them with magic to turn their eyes into spirals so they could always be identified, and forced them to speak a different language so they could not intermingle with society. The Bedolls were forced to work in factories building even more Machina. Wow, talk about slavery. Spira was once a technologically advanced civilization, and there were big cities with Machina. However, there was a great war between Zanarkand and Bevel, instigated by the leader of Bevel accusing Zanarkand's leaders of heresy who abandoned their religion. This conflict became known as the Machina War. During the war, lovers Len and Shuyin were drafted into the armies of Zanarkand. Shuyin, fearing for his love's survival, infiltrated Bevel and tried to activate the Machina superweapon, Vecna to put an end to the war, resulting in the annihilation of Bevel. Len set out after him and stopped him from activating the dreaded weapon, but Bevel's soldiers shot them both down. As the war was coming to an end, Zanarkand was about to lose since Bevel had superior Machina and had the upper hand. The survivors of the city gathered under the guidance of Yu Yevon, who was believed to be the most powerful summoner alive. Yu Yevon directed all the citizens to flee to the nearby Mount Gagased. There, refusing to admit the fall of their beloved metropolis, the people of Zanarkand let themselves be turned into faith, gathering on a massive wall on the slopes of Gagased. Yu Yevon then used them to begin the summoning of a city, a new ideal Zanarkand, forever at peace and eternally holding alive the memory of its former glory. Yu Yevon gathered millions of stray fireflies around himself, forming an armor which he programmed a series of guiding instincts, wiping out large human settlements, attack any Machina, and respond to aggression with overwhelming force. Yu Yevon lost control of his creation and became trapped inside its instinctive behavior. He became an entity whose purpose is only to summon the gigantic monster that will become known as Sin. And so, Sin destroyed the city of Zanarkand and even decimated the incoming Bevelian army. The only ones to escape the carnage were Yu Yevon's daughter, Yunalesca, and her husband, Zayon. Yunalesca and her husband, Zayon, returned to the ruins of Zanarkand and turned her husband into a faith and uses Aeon to defeat Sin. Her actions were not a permanent solution and died when the entity that Yu Yevon became broke her mental line to Zeon, as he possesses the Aeon. With Sin's defeat, the people of Spira will live a short time of peace known as the First Calm, and those that survived will begin to rebuild Spira. Using Zeon's Aeon as a core, a new Sin was born thanks to Yu Yevon. This new Sin would destroy the remaining Machina civilizations, and the use of Machina began to fall out of favor. In Bavel, the Yevon Temple was established, and the teachings of paying homage to Yevon and Yunalesca and strictly prohibiting the use of Machina were adopted by the world at large. And so, the temples of Yevon take control of Spira. The doctrines of the temple encourage stagnation and place all hope in the final summoning, a ritual inspired by Yunalesca's defeat of Sin. This religion, known as the Order of Yevon, established Sin as a punishment and incarnation of humanity's sins into its doctrine, spreading the story that the calm will arrive with the final summoning. The people were also led to believe that the only way Sin could be completely exorcised was through complete atonement for the sins of the past. The Yevonites would then use the Al Bhed as scapegoats for Sin's creation, with most executed in numbers, while the rest were ostracized, thus creating a millennia of racism and bigotry against the Al Bhed. The surviving Al Bhed would flee and settle on the desert island known as Bikanel Island. They would fight for the free use of Machina and to expose the temple for what it truly is. Formation of the Crusaders. 800 years ago, a warrior known as Mihen formed a military legion known as the Crusaders, originally named the Crimson Blades. Their ranks grew over the years as they have sworn to battle Sin despite the odds being against them. The Maesters of Yevon feared an uprising and accused them of rebellion. Lord Mihen then headed to Bavel to face their charges and refute them. He succeeded in winning the trust of the Maesters, and his legion became an arm of the Yevon clergy. Mihen then founded the Crusaders' Monster Arena in the Calm Lands. Yunalesca, who remained in Sanarkand as an unsent, crafted a deal with Bavel in exchange for people honoring the memory of her father, Yu Yevon. She will personally show summoners at the end of their pilgrimage the way to defeat Sin. Omega, the traitor. 700 years ago, a monk of Yevon named Omega was labeled a traitor for doubting the teachings and openly rebelling against the temples. Unable to go to the far plane, his spirit lingered in Spira and became a fearsome fiend. His hatred of Yevon grew immensely that he spawned a lesser beast, known as Ultima Weapon. The islands where Omega reside are known as the Omega Ruins. The High Summoners. The first summoner to defeat Sin since Yunalesca was Gandalf, known for sealing up the cactuars roaming about the Thunder Plains in stone, as he believed that defeating Sin was not the only thing summoners could do to help Spira. As such, the Thunder Plains became known as the Gandalf Thunder Plains. During his final battle with Sin around 400 years prior to the events of the game, Gandalf left his mark with the formation of a huge rift in the Calm Lands that became known as the Scar. This isolated the Remian Temple and started the Second Calm. His sacrifice lent credence to Yevon's teachings, and doubts about the temples subsided. The next summoner was a Killican Blitzball star named Ohalland, who equaled Yunalesca's and Gandalf's feat and defeated Sin, only to bring another temporary calm as the fourth incarnation of Sin appeared with Ohalland's final Aeon as its core. The fourth High Summoner was a Crusader called Lady Yoken, who defeated Sin with her final summoning and became a High Summoner. The fifth Sin appeared with Yoken's Aeon as his core. The Journey of Braska. 10 years prior to the events of the game, in the Dream Xanarkand, a Blitzball star called Jack went to sea for training and touched the fifth incarnation of Sin and was transported to Spira. He became imprisoned in Bavel, being thought of as a drunken madman. But then, a disgraced warrior monk named Auron and a summoner named Braska recruited him to be his guardian regardless. Throughout this journey, Jet recruits everything through a sphere and leaves various spheres in many places where the players can find them. He also overcomes his alcoholism and accepts that he will never return home. Braska then asks Auron a favor when they get to the island of Besaid, that once the pilgrimage ends, to bring Yuna there so she can be happy. Once they get to Xanarkand, Jet decides to become the Faith for the final summoning, as he has a plan on breaking the cycle of death that has been causing destruction and chaos to Spira for millennia. When Braska and Jet perish defeating Sin, Auron confronted Yunalesca and was struck down. Mortally wounded, he went to Mount Gagaset where he was found by a Ronso named Kimahri. Auron then asked Kimahri to find Yuna and take her to Besaid, thus fulfilling Braska's request. He was then found by an Albed called Rin, who healed his wounds, but then disappeared. The truth was that he was able to write Sin and enter the Dream Zanarkand. He would look after the young Tidus, who resented and hated his father not only for being such a bully, but also blamed him for his mother's death after disappearing. 10 years pass, and Tidus becomes a popular blitzball player. Meanwhile, in Spira, Kimahri stayed by Yuna after taking her to Besaid. Wakka and Chapu became Yuna's big brother figures, while Lulu was not only a big sister, but also a maternal figure to Yuna. And now, let us begin with Final Fantasy X. Ten years have passed. The Dream Zanarkand remains a bustling metropolis. Tidus is a star player of his blitzball team called the Zanarkand Aves. He signs autographs for his fans and then goes to the stadium. It is a tournament held in Jecht's honor after his disappearance known as the Jecht Memorial Cup. During the game against the Zanarkand Duggles, Sin arrives and begins to wreak havoc. Tidus then meets up with Auron, who gives him a sword, a gift from Jecht. Tidus looks at a massive creature in the sky surrounded by water. Auron tells him that they called it Sin. After fighting various creatures and foes to evacuate the city, Tidus is pulled into Spira by Sin. He awakens at the botched temple, where he is attacked by a fiend, but rescued by an Albed called Riku. He is then forced to work by the Albed so he can stay with them. He and Riku then find some ancient ruins deep in the ocean and succeed in finding an airship. He then tells her about Zanarkand and that he is a blitzball player. Riku tells Tidus that Zanarkand was destroyed 1,000 years ago by Sin, and that he's suffering from amnesia due to Sin's toxin, which shocks and confuses him. Realizing that he plays blitzball, Riku decides to take him to Luca where someone might recognize him. Riku then tells him to not mention that he is from Zanarkand, because it's a holy place and he might upset anyone that is a believer of Yevon. But then, Sin approaches the ship, shaking it, and causes Tidus to fall. Tidus then washes ashore on the island of Besaid, where he meets Wakka and his blitzball team to which he is a coach and captain, the Besaid Aurochs. Tidus then tells Wakka and his team that he is from Zanarkand, but retracts his words telling him that he got close to Sin and is suffering from amnesia. Wakka tells him that long ago, Spira was a technologically advanced civilization, until Sin arrived and destroyed all the cities, including Zanarkand. He then takes him back to the village and confesses that the Besaid Aurochs haven't won a game for 10 long years, and Tidus teaches him a new goal, victory, which can raise the morale of the team. Tidus also learns the Yevon prayer as well, and learns about the Crusaders and the summoners in the Besaid Temple. He then goes into the temple's Cloister of Trials, despite not being a guardian to help the summoner, and it turns out that it's none other than Yuna herself, who completed her trial and obtained her first Aeon, Valifor. Tidus then speaks with Yuna for the first time that night, and Lulu berates Wakka for bringing him to the village despite being surprised how he looked like Chapu, Wakka's younger brother who was killed by Sin after joining the Crusaders. The next day, Tidus goes along with Yuna and her guardians Kimahri, Wakka, and Lulu to go on a journey to defeat Sin. Wakka gives Tidus a sword he gave Chapu, the Brotherhood. On the trip to Kilika Island, Tidus tells Yuna about his hometown, Zanarkand. She realizes that this is no chance encounter as Jecht, her father's guardian, has also claimed to have come from Zanarkand. When Kilika is ravaged by Sin, Yuna becomes determined to defeat Sin and performs a sending. The sending is a ritual to send the dead to the far plane and prevent them from lingering in the world and becoming fiends. The far plane is where the dead find peace, and it is a reference to the afterlife, or heaven if you like. They then go to Kilika Temple so that Yuna can enter the Chamber of the Faith to obtain the second Aeon. There, they meet a rival blitzball team called the Luca Goers, who mock them for doing their best, and they also meet a root summoner called Donna and her guardian, Bartello. After praying in the Kilika Temple and obtaining the fiery Aeon, Ifrit, they go to Luca to the blitzball tournament. At the ship to Luca, Tidus remembers his father performing his legendary shot, the Jack Shot Mark III, and how his father tells him that he cannot do it. Tidus improves him wrong by successfully performing the shot. At Luca, Kimari encounters the two Ronsos, Biran and Yenke, who bully him. Yuna is captured by the Albed, to which Tidus, Lulu, and Kimari go to save her. Tidus then learns that Yuna is half Albed, a secret that no one except Lulu knows about. The Aurochs then win against the Albed Sykes, and then play against the Luca Goers and win the championship. The stadium is then attacked by fiends, but the people are saved by Seymour Guado, a maester of Yevon of the Guado race, by summoning his Aeon, Anima. Tidus then confronts Auron and blames him for bringing him to Spira and no longer being able to go home. He then tells Tidus that his father Jax became Sin, and so he decides to go up to Zanarkand to find some answers to why his father became Sin. Auron then joins the group as a promise to Braska, and the pilgrimage continues. Yuna and her entourage witness much during this journey. The Crusaders begin a joint operation with the Albed called Operation Mihen in an attempt to stop Sin using Machina, but the operation becomes a catastrophic failure. Later, Riku, the Albed girl who helped Tidus when he first came to Spira, would also join the group. When Waka learns that she is an Albed, he becomes upset, as he is such a devout follower of Yevon and sees the Albed as heathens who don't believe in Yevon and constantly violate the teachings by defiantly using Machina and fighting for its free use. As you can see, throughout history, religion has often scapegoated technology and many things causing social ostracism and bigotry. They also learned that Maester Seymour Guado has machinations of his own and murdered his father Jiskel, who was also a maester of Yevon. When they defeat him, they are immediately labeled as traitors and are forced to flee with their lives. They are pursued by the Guado and defeat a powerful fiend called Wendigo and fall under the lake. But then, Sin transports them all to Bikanau Island. At Bikanau Island, the group then reunites and Riku leads them to the home of the Albed, simply called Home, where Yuna is after being rescued. They arrive at home only to see it under attack by fiends and the Guado. The leader of the Albed, Sid, who is Riku's father and Yuna's uncle, leads them underground to help everyone escape. Riku tells him that Yuna and other summoners are in the Summoner's Sanctum to keep them safe. Tidus then learns a dark and tragic truth about the pilgrimage that the others except him knew about. When a summoner summons the final Aeon, though the summoning may defeat Sin, the summoner dies as well. Tidus becomes very upset by this due to his optimism, and Yuna will only just smile even if she knew she was going to die. Dana and Isaru tell them that it is their choice even if it means their lives, because that's what it means to be a summoner. So then, our heroes enter the airship called the Fahrenheit, a ship that flies after 1,000 years. They are forced to destroy home with all the fiends inside, and Sid's son, brother, mourns the loss. While trying to locate Yuna, Sid and Auron discuss about the pilgrimage. Sid wants Yuna to stop this pilgrimage because if she continues it, she will die. They then go to Bavel and rescue Yuna, who is forced to marry Seymour, now in Unsend. After that, they are put on trial for the attack on Seymour and joining in the Albed's insurrection. Yuna explains the reason why Seymour had to be stopped was due to him committing patricide, to which Seymour nonchalantly confesses to be true. She then urges Grand Maester Micah to send him to the far plane. He then reveals himself as an Unsend. And this shows how the Yevonites don't truly practice what they preach. They believe that enlightened rule by the dead is preferable to the misguided failures of the living. They're all sentenced to death in the Via Purifico, and Yuna reunites with Kimari, Auron, and Lulu and encounter Isaru, a summoner who is under orders to stop Yuna. Yuna and Isaru engage in an Aeon duel in which Yuna is victorious. The group then manages to escape their death sentence in the Via Purifico and see that Maester Seymour killed Maester Keenock, an old friend of Auron. Seymour reveals that he plans to become the next Sin and destroy Spira to end its suffering. The team then fights and defeats Seymour and then escape from Bavel with their lives and continue the pilgrimage. When they finally arrive at their destination, the sacred ruins of Zanarkand, they learn something entirely different about the final summoning. Sin cannot truly be destroyed using the final summoning. Not now, not ever. Every final Aeon that defeats Sin becomes Sin in its place. They then proceed to defeat Yunalesca, thus subverting and ending a 1,000-year-old tradition that did not end in chaos and destruction. She warns them that even if they did destroy Sin, Yu Yevon would only create Sin anew. And so, the group goes on a new journey to defeat Sin without the final Aeon by searching for another way. After uncovering truths and fallacies behind Sin and the teachings of Yevon, they finally succeed in defeating Seymour for the last time and vanquishing Sin for good. Although the group was victorious, this victory meant he would vanish. A heavy price is paid, but Spira finds peace and freedom from the terror of Sin at last. Yuna makes a speech at the stadium in Luca announcing the time has come to rebuild Spira and never forget the people that died and the dreams that faded. 2 years have passed since Sin was finally destroyed for good. Since then, Spira has entered a new era of peace known as the Eternal Calm. Yuna became a High Summoner, Wakka and Lulu have wed, and Kimahri became the new Elder of the Ronso. Though she spends her days on her home of Besaid Island, she feels emptiness in her heart. One day, her former guardian and cousin, Riku, comes to Besaid and shows Yuna a movie sphere. It's a recording of what appears to be Tidus. Yuna cannot tell whether it's him or just someone who looks like him. Riku then suggests looking for more clues. And so, Yuna begins a new journey as she becomes a sphere hunter. Sphere hunters are adventurers searching for spheres to learn more of the ancient history of Spira. In this journey, Yuna searches for more clues about Tidus. If it were him, she will be able to see him again, but if it's not him, she may never see him again. Yuna and Riku have become sphere hunters and are journeying across Spira to look for clues about Tidus. Joining them is a fellow sphere hunter called Pain, along with 3 Outbed, Brother, Buddy, and Shinra. They are called the Gullwings. The Gullwings have a rivalry with the LeBlanc Syndicate, a group of sphere hunters led by LeBlanc. The story begins at the stadium in Luca, where Yuna is singing at a concert. Our 3 heroines are there to retrieve Yuna's dress sphere, which was stolen by LeBlanc, who was posing as Yuna during the concert. They succeed and continue their journey hunting for spheres. They scale to the top of Mount Gagaset to retrieve a sphere containing a video of Spira's ancient history. Although they beat LeBlanc to it, they realize that the sphere was only a dud. Over the past 2 years, Spira has changed as now people no longer live in fear of Sin and are traveling to learn more about Spira's history, and the Outbed are accepted. Despite this eternal calm, not all is well, as we see that the Guado are now outcasts and despised as the Outbed were in the past due to the actions of Seymour, and the Ronso want revenge against them. Yuna returns home to Besaid and visits Wakka and Lulu, who are about to become parents. They also meet the Youth League, a group of former Crusaders and Chocobo Knights led by Maven Nuge. The Youth League are at odds with New Yevon, formed by a monk called Trema from the shattered remains of the Yevon religion half a year after Sin's defeat. The leader of New Yevon is Baralai. Another faction known as the Machine Faction led by an Outbed called Gipple, who is good friends with Riku. The Machine Faction aims to propagate the use of Machina and hires people to excavate in the Bikanal Desert. It turns out that Nuge, Baralai, and Gipple know Pain, who pretends to not know them. On a trip to Zanarkand, which was turned into a tourist attraction, the group finds have a sphere. When they learn of a special sphere in Kilika Temple, the heroines head there on a double and realize that both the Youth League and New Yevon are squabbling with each other. Both factions are hostile towards each other due to differing views. Yuna, Riku, and Pain manage to destroy the Yevon Machina, Haymaker, and succeed in obtaining the special sphere. When they look at the special sphere, they see a Tidus lookalike in front of a massive Monstrous Machina weapon and believes he can count on it to save a woman called Len. Later that night, Yuna dances and sings for everyone, but becomes upset wondering who is Len. While she sleeps, she has a dream of her and Tidus running away from Bavelian troops and are both shot dead. The next morning, the Gullwings decide to give the special sphere either to New Yevon or the Youth League, depending on the player's choice. However, if one faction is given the special sphere, the other faction will become hostile towards the Gullwings. While giving the special sphere back to whichever faction depending on the player's choice, the airship is raided by LeBlanc. In order to sneak into Chateau LeBlanc, which used to be Seymour's mansion in Guadalsalam, the team decides to steal some LeBlanc Syndicate uniforms. They succeed and manage to enter the place. There, they overhear LeBlanc and Nuge talking about the location of Vecnagun, to which he has plans for. They also collect recorded spheres called Crimson Spheres, which depict a bloody selection of Crusaders killed in training known as a Crimson Squad, and that 4 people are missing. They locate half of the other sphere and reclaim their own half. After defeating LeBlanc, Logos, and Army, they see the sphere recording showing Vecnagun, including its location beneath Bavel. The Goings then realize how extremely dangerous this weapon is, and they have to dismantle it before it can destroy all of Spira. The two teams cooperate and they head to Bavel to dismantle the weapon. They manage to enter the underground temple of Saint Bavel and see how the area was shown in the sphere is exactly the same. They encounter the praetor of New Yevon, Baralai, who insists that it must not be disturbed. The Gullwings then fight against Baralai and manage to defeat him. They then encounter a Dark Aeon, which is none other than Bahamut. Yuna tries to reason with it, but Pain tells her that they have no choice but to fight. After defeating Bahamut, Yuna is in shock and disbelief, and she proceeds to Vecnagun's chamber, but all the Goings find is a large hole. The Goings then realize that there is a rampage of fiends all over Spira coming from the temples. The Gullwings then decide to become a monster hunter team called Your Friendly Neighborhood Gullwings, courtesy of Riku. Well, Riku, I hope that Marvel doesn't come and file a lawsuit against you for appropriating Spider-Man's slogan. So, the Gullwings are helping everyone that they can in Spira and even find a sphere where the man resembling Tidus is incarcerated and vows to the Yevonites in Bavel that someday their own precious weapons will end up destroying them. It is now clear that the Machina is a relic from the war 1,000 years ago between Bavel and Zanarkand, which resulted in the rise of Sin. The resemblance between Tidus and that man that Yuna and the others saw in those spheres may mean a deeper connection and warrants a further investigation. They revisit Besaid to help out Wakka, who is cleaning their own Temple of Fiends, and butting heads with a member of the Youth League who seeks to burn down the entire temple to prevent more fiends from coming out as a solution. In the Chamber of the Faith, they encounter a dark version of Yuna's first Aeon, Valifor, and it seems to be the source of the fiends. After defeating it, Wakka admits that sometimes it can be foolish to risk everything for just one memory, and declares that memories are just memories, as said by the Al Bhed. After defeating Dark Ifrit in Kilika, they notice another hole where the Faith used to be and looks similar to what they found with Vecnagun and Bavel. In Jose Temple, they find that Gipple has disappeared as well, and they defeat a Dark Ixion within. After winning the battle, an explosion knocks Yuna into the hole in the Chamber of the Faith. Yuna wakes up in what appears to be the far plane, where she is in her songstress dress sphere and encounters a man resembling Tidus named Shuyin, who mistakes her for Len. It turns out that both were murdered, and Shuyin lingered as an unsent. Shuyin believes that everyone in Spira is still fighting and dying for nothing, and vows to use Vecnagun to make it all go away so he can pass on with Len peacefully. Yuna is uncertain if her emotions are her own or those of Len's. Suddenly, Nuge snaps her out of it, and it turns out that it was Baralai, who was possessed by Shuyin. As Nuge and Gippo help her up, they pursue Baralai in order to stop him and give her spheres so she can give them to Pain. Back on a ship called the Celsius, Yuna realizes that the dress sphere that she wore once belonged to Len, Shuyen's lover. Pain confesses to Yuna and Riku her acquaintance with Nuge, Gipple, and Barreleye. The three men were selected as candidates for the Crimson Squad during the time of Operation Mihen, and she acted as a recorder assigned to their team. It was a squad intended to be an elite combat group under the command of Yevon, as a replacement for the many Crusaders lost to Sin. But everyone except them died during an exercise training. After that, they survived and split up. Pain became a sphere hunter to uncover the truth. With all three leaders gone, Yuna decides to calm things down before tensions between the three factions boil over and explode into violence. The Goings unanimously agreed to make a concert and gather all the people of Spira to unite them all. The emotions of Len become much stronger, and when the concert begins, Yuna reminds the people of Spira of the terrible civil war that occurred 1,000 years ago, which resulted in the appearance of Sin. The song she performed is called 1,000 Words, and Len's voice begins to come out of Yuna, thus uniting the people of Spira and urging them to not tear each other apart again. As she sings, Len's memories begin to manifest themselves as she takes the place of Yuna and reveals to everyone how War drove Shuyen to try and activate Vetnagun and end it all, only for her to stop him and the lovers meeting a tragic end. War brings out the worst in all of us. Once the song ends, Yuna has succeeded in convincing the people to end their petty squabbling and be at peace with one another. Machen, who is believed to be a scholar of Yevon, tells them that Len was once a popular songstress who was forced to become a summoner during the war. Because the summoners of Sanderkin were getting killed in the front lines, Shuyen tried to save Len and end the war by trying to steal Bevel's Machina weapon, Vetnagun. Tragically, the lovers met an end. Things start to go good as families and lovers are reunited as the petty squabbles have ended, and in Besaid, Waka and Lulu's baby was finally born. Waka then names his new son Vedina. In Zanarkand, they learned that Vetnagun was never used to fight Sin because it would kill indiscriminately as it could not distinguish between friend and foe. In Guadosalam, Trammel and the rest of the Guado have finally returned home and accept the consequences of their actions head-on and in peace. The Guado unanimously accept Trammel as their leader, and in Mount Gagaset, Kimari insists the Ranso make peace with the Guado and not walk a path of vengeance. Sid is rescued at the Thunder Plains and then reconciles with brother and Riku after a long family dispute. In Bikanau Island, they find the Cactuar village and defeat a powerful fiend named Angra Mainyu and succeed in ending the overwhelming fiend invasion. The Goings head to the hole in Bevel Underground to take on Vetnagun and save Spira, as well as Nuge, Gipple, and Barreleye. In this fight, the voices of Braska, Auron, and Jekt guide Yuna and succeed in defeating the monstrous Machina. Yuna then wears a dress sphere and is about to convince Shuyen to stop this attempt to destroy Spira. Shuyen is about to concede, but realizes that it is not Len, which leads to a final conflict. Yuna, Riku, and Pain defeat Shuyen once and for all, and then Len's spirit calms Shuyen down, and the two are finally able to be together and pass on in peace. At the Lucas Stadium, the three leaders finally returned and made a speech accepting the consequences of their actions head-on and declaring the calm will continue thanks to Yuna. In the end, Yuna returns home and then reunites with her long-lost love, Tidus. All's well that ends well. Final Fantasy X-2 Last Mission is an epilogue to Final Fantasy X-2, included with an international version and HD remaster, featuring a dungeon crawler gameplay style. The HD remaster made this epilogue available for English speakers for the first time on March 18, 2014. Set 3 months after the defeat of Vetnagun and Shuyen, the Gullwings have gone their separate ways, but one day, each girl receives a letter calling the trio back together in Luca to investigate a new discovered Usitor Tower? Hope I didn't butcher that. They travel on board the Celsius, only to realize that they cannot go to the top with their ship. Too bad. You're going to have to go to the top the old-fashioned way. As they explore the ruins, they discuss what they have been doing since they separated. Riku continued working on missions. Pain talks about how Nuge dissolved the Youth League, and Barreleye is following suit with New Yevon. Gipple still leads the Machine faction as he helped Nuge, Barrelite do Roundton apology duty for tearing Spira apart. Yuna talks about how she needed a change after Tidus vanished when Sin was finally defeated, which is why she joined the Goldwings but is now fine with her life on Besaid. She is living a life with Tidus and Besaid, much to the jealousy of Riku, who asks Yuna why she stays on Besaid instead of doing something like taking in airship groups around the world. Yuna will do the same one day, but does not want to rush things. During this trek, the girls reminisce about their time as a team and even have a moment of argument, such as Riku accusing Yuna of wasting her life, while the latter retorts that the former is only fooling herself by always keeping busy. As the cousins bicker with each other, Pain raises her voice and asks the two what's the point of reuniting if they're only going to fight. It turns out that Pain was the one who sent the letters because she felt something missing after the ladies went their separate ways. She believed that getting the group back together would give them something to hold on to again. She even confesses that she made up the part in the letter about something Ward seen at the top of the tower, but she wanted another adventure like old times. Although things don't go as planned, Yuna says they should keep going as Riku wonders what will happen when this adventure ends, and Pain says they'll find out once they reach the top. Pain also talks about the painful memories with Nuge, Barrelite, and Gipple under Shuyen's control. Riku remembers how fearful and desperate she was to save Yuna when they were approaching the ruins of Zanarkand 2 years ago. Yuna believes that although she did not know about the final Aeon, being with her friends on her pilgrimage was enough for her. This journey is about learning how they have changed and also the fear of growing further apart as long as they're together and getting along because of working together. When they reach the top at last, they find a broken down Machina. While Riku expresses disappointment about all the trouble they went through, the girls realize how different they have become after being apart. And so, the girls decide to go their separate ways again, and whether or not they will see each other again, they will always cherish the memories of their time together. With their bond of friendship renewed, the Machina springs to life, and their adventures continue. Final Fantasy X Will is an audio drama written by Kazushige Nojima. It is set 1 year after the events of Final Fantasy X-2 and 6 months after last mission. New characters are introduced such as Chwami and Kurgum. Now, I didn't like the story very much, and I didn't like Chwami because she's a judgmental asshat. Chwami and her childhood friend Kurgum are traveling across Spira and head to Besaid to see Yuna on orders from Baralai. Kurgum was to become a summoner, but when the Eternal Calm began, the faith had disappeared, but he can still usher souls to the far plane. Yuna returned to her mannerisms and dress style of her summoner days and spends her days in the Temple of Besaid praying for true peace in Spira, much to Chwami's chagrin. Tidus has become a popular blitzball player in Luca, and Waka and Lulu are raising their child. Kurgum shows Yuna a movie sphere with a recording of 2 Shoe-Puffs at the Moonflow. One Shoe-Puff was the last of its kind after the female was killed by Sin 30 years ago. But it mysteriously reappeared one morning, causing Yuna to speculate that the Shoe-Puff had been beckoned. When Yuna refuses to go to Bevel with them, Chwami tells her that Tidus has been injured, prompting her to take action. Lulu confronts Chwami, who claims to be Auron's daughter, saying she looks nothing like him. She responds that she takes after her own mother, and Lulu responds that Auron would have not hidden being a father. During the journey to Bevel, Yuna, Waka, Kurgum, and Chwami stop at the Moonflow seeing Shoe-Puffs and a crowd of onlookers where half of the people are illusions created by the Pyreflies. Kurgum tries to send the illusions to the far plane, but stops after Yuna says they don't have the right to interfere with a reunion. Once they get to Bevel, they learn that Sin has been reactivated, most likely beckoned by someone's wish. It turns out that the Eternal Calm was not meant to be after all. It turns out that Tidus and Yuna have broken up and are meeting other people. One of the many things that I hated so much in this story. Chwami and Kurgum part ways with the latter accompanying Yuna and Waka, and the former returning to Besaid with Tidus. Lulu suggests to Tidus that he and Yuna should reconcile and get back together. Listen to Lulu, Tidus. Tidus decides to accompany Yuna and the others on a new journey since he promised to be with her forever. Yuna makes a speech in the stadium proclaiming that she will defeat Sin once more. And that is all for the Final Fantasy X timeline, everyone. Final Fantasy X is one of my most favorite titles in the series, as it took the series to a whole new level with an emotional story centered in the theme of free will, love, religious authoritarianism, defiance of prohibitions, subversion of worthless traditions, perseverance, friendship, and how good memories can make bonds that last forever. Final Fantasy X-2 I did not like as much as 10, but I gotta say that it was okay. Final Fantasy X that one I didn't like. Now, if you indeed like that one, then that's okay, and you can let me know your reasons in the comments. And this wraps up the 5th episode of World of Timelines. I'm John of Video Games and the World signing off. Take care, and I will see you all in the next episode. Bye!